The level of safety that is imparted on these units, both by the manufacturer and by Alcoa standards, it would probably take a person's purposeful act to defeat those safety interlocks, those safety procedures, in order to put themselves in danger.
This room, the exposure room, is probably one of the safest facilities you'll see anywhere in any industrial X-ray laboratory.
Siemens' philosophy in all of its products has been always to not cut corners. We take our engineering very serious.
I feel there's almost no chance of any radiation exposure whatsoever while working with this system here.
We recognize radiation as an important element that helps all of us at Alcoa meet both our internal and external customers' needs. Used properly, radiation equipment provides a safe means of accomplishing our quality objectives. Misused, this invisible partner can cause serious injury. In fact, cases of radiation exposure are reported throughout the nation each year. While the energy of a radiation beam and the damage it can inflict have not changed over the years, the equipment has. 20 years ago, interlocks were not the standard. Most units were not enclosed, so it was easy to place your hand in the path of the radiation beam. Today, the addition of key safety features to ATC's X-ray producing equipment has made operating the equipment safer than ever. Yet because most units feature interlocks, enclosures, and warning lights, we may be tempted to take safety for granted. We can become complacent, relying solely on safety features to protect us from the dangers of radiation. But safety features are effective only when used in conjunction with common sense. We must continually review our operating practices to make sure we're working as safely as we can. Most of us have never experienced a radiation burn. If we work smart, we can keep it that way.
Jim, are we going to have those sample results done in time?
These are tricky samples.
Yeah, I know. But I've got to have those results.
Yeah, sure, you'll have them.
Okay.
Sometimes, because of project urgency, we may be tempted to overlook safety. But we must remember that safety should always take precedence over getting the job done. Never take additional risks for the sake of production or profit. On occasion, interlocks may need to be defeated by authorized personnel for equipment maintenance. This is the only time an interlock should be defeated. Even when an authorized defeat of the interlock takes place, a hazardous situation can be created. If these situations are not properly controlled, an operator's safety may be jeopardized. Procedures and practices must be established to ensure that equipment requiring maintenance is returned to its safe state.
Well, we had a repairman in to do some maintenance work on the instrument, and in order for him to complete his maintenance work, he had to have the instrument operating. So what he did, we have an interlock right here in the front. He defeated the interlock by taping this. And so we just operated for a while, not knowing that the interlock was still defeated. And one day we had an inspection, and when I took the cover off the front of the instrument was still on. The tube is at the top here, and maybe there might have been some radiation exposure if the tube wasn't functioning properly, as well as maybe an electrical shock, because we have all the electronics down here in the cabinet also.
Equipment operators need to be familiar with the safety features built into their equipment. On a daily basis, you should conduct a routine safety check of the unit's safety features to assure that everything is working as required. Most importantly, be aware of any irregularities in the safety mechanisms. Remember that all of these features are mechanical or electrical. Although they are highly reliable, they can fail.
The X-ray producing equipment here is provided with interlocks on the enclosures, and they are provided as a backup safety mechanism to ensure that someone is not inadvertently exposed to X-rays if they were to open the enclosure. They are meant to be a backup safety mechanism and not the primary line of defense for the operator. So it is important that the operator continues to close the shutter on their equipment before opening the enclosure, or turn off power to the tube to stop X-ray generation, and not rely solely on the interlock for their protection.
Hey, Bill,
What's up, Linda?
you did a repair last month?
Yeah, I repaired a broken window.
Which window?
Right here.
It's not leaded glass, it's regular glass.
You gotta be kidding.
Come on, let's go. We gotta shut down, lock, tag, and try this equipment.
After the repair has been completed and the equipment has been energized, a survey must be conducted before the unit is put back into operation. This is the only dependable way of ensuring that the unit is safe to operate. Also, a survey must be conducted upon installation or when a modification is made. While this might seem to be a superfluous procedure to some, it is absolutely necessary, and it is required by law. The surveys are designed to protect you, and this is consistent with Alcoa's stated value that there is nothing more important than your health and safety. Dr. Harvey Slater, director of the Burn Trauma Unit at West Penn Hospital, describes the damage radiation exposure can cause to the human body.
Different body tissues have different sensitivity to radiation. With massive exposure, the tissues on the inside of the body are damaged and show this damage. They lose their function faster than the skin does. So with massive amounts of radiation, damage is done to the nervous system, to the intestinal tract, to the bone marrow and blood cells. And the more rapidly growing tissues are the most sensitive to radiation. A fetus is not only rapidly growing, but the cells are differentiating. They are changing in number and they're changing in function. There's a lot of genetic activity going on. So these fetal cells are quite vulnerable to radiation. The skin is relatively resistant as compared to these other body tissues. See, if you're burned by a flame or coming in contact with hot material, the adjacent tissues, the tissues next to the burn, usually are quite normal and they can be used to repair the damage. But with radiation, we know that the skin around an obvious radiation injury isn't normal, and that doesn't lend itself to repair.
Because of the type of X-ray producing equipment at the Alcoa Technical Center, the greatest risk of injury to an operator is a skin burn. Since most beams are collimated, burns may not be immediately noticeable. Lastly, exposure to ionizing radiation, even at low dosages, can produce genetic disorders.
The proteins in the body that control cell growth are damaged by the ionizing radiation. You can't see it, you can't feel it. These altered chromosomes will lay dormant for decades. And years after the exposure, we know that patients who have been exposed to high dose or even moderate doses of radiation have increased incidences of cancers like leukemia. This may occur years later. The process is painless. You don't know what's happening, but we do know that it's initiated by the radiation. We're all being radiated every day. There is natural radiation in the environment. When you fly in an airplane, you subject yourself to ionizing radiation. It is cumulative. The dose applied to you statistically stays with you for the rest of your life. Every exposure adds up. So ideally, you want to minimize your exposure to unnecessary radiation. You don't want medical x-rays taken if you don't really need them. You want to minimize the radiation that you receive in your workplace because there are other kinds of radiation that we have no control over.
Dr. Neil Wald of the University of Pittsburgh comments on natural sources of radiation.
The natural background comes from outer space, cosmic radiation. It comes from minerals in the crust of the Earth, and it comes from radioactive elements that are distributed in our food or in our water, which are there through nature. We can't exist without potassium, for example, and potassium has some radioactive isotopes, so all of us are radioactive if we're alive.
Approximately 60 X-ray producing units are in use at the Alcoa Technical Center. Many of these have multiple X-ray tubes. Of these units, there are 4 basic types. The first is radiography. Radiography equipment is used for the examination of the macroscopic structure of materials by non-destructive methods using X-rays.
This is the operating station of the quality assurance X-ray system, and basically we have a real-time X-ray system. What that means is we do not operate with film. What we see is what is happening instantly. We have similar to a TV camera. In this area here where the operator sits, we have several safety devices. Of course, we have a means of opening and shutting the door. We have a window, lead-lined window, that protects us from the radiation inside the room, but also permits us to view actually what's going on into the room from the operator's seat. We have TV monitors that we have cameras mounted inside the X-ray enclosure. The one monitor here is positioned directly above the source and tells us what the source is being pointed at. The highest radiation is where it's coming right out of the source. So this shows us where the highest radiation is going. We also have another TV camera mounted above our front entrance door that shows us the room. And we can also, if we can't see it through the window, we might be able to see somebody left in the room on the TV monitor. We also have some indicator lights over here, which when the system is energized, if all interlocks are in fact made properly and it is a safe condition, a green indicator light will come on, telling me, the operator, that I can now energize the system safely. The box right next to me here is the actual starting point in the brains of our safety unit. To start the system, we have to turn the key on. And one thing that we have here is we have a yellow flashing light and an audible tone that you hear to warn anybody in close proximity that the X-ray system is now triggered and ready to be energized, and it has to be energized within 30 seconds. This way, if you're in the enclosure and the operator don't see you, you can take precautions. There's several emergency stop buttons throughout the enclosure that you can press, which would stop the system from being turned on.
The second type of X-ray producing equipment at ATC is analytical. These instruments utilize X-rays to determine the elemental or chemical composition, or to examine the microstructure of materials, usually by X-ray diffraction or fluorescence. They account for half of all the X-ray equipment at ATC and include X-ray diffractometers, spectrophotometers, particle size analyzers, and X-ray fluorescence.
This is a modern X-ray producing piece of equipment, an X-ray diffractometer. There's the X-ray tube, sample chamber, detector, and X-ray generator. Some of the interlocks on this thing is there's a major interlock on the doors of this thing. So if you open the doors, a micro switch closes and you can't produce X-rays. There are 2 interlocks you can't see. One is the light bulb and the X-ray on light indicator. If that bulb burns out, you cannot produce X-rays. The second interlock is the X-ray shutter light. If the X-ray shutter light burns out, you cannot produce X-rays. Finally, most modern pieces of equipment are controlled through either computers or microprocessors. This way you can run the software start a scan, turn on the shutter, run the scan, and turn off the shutter without actually accessing the X-ray chamber.
The third type of X-ray producing equipment at ATC is a group of equipment that produces X-rays incidental to their primary function. This group includes electron microscopes. Electron microscopes utilize the wave characteristics of electrons that have been accelerated by an electric field to visualize the microscopic structure of material. They output X-rays secondary to their primary function. The fourth and final type of X-ray producing equipment at Alcoa, gauges, measure the thickness of aluminum sheet, thickness of coatings, density of materials, or contents of a tank. Measurements are taken by determining the intensity of an X-ray beam after penetrating the material. Like much of the modern X-ray producing equipment, this gauge is computer controlled.
This is an Accuray X-ray gauge that's used for metal thickness determination. And some of the safety features we have here, you notice the lights, even though they're not operational right now, if the shutter would be open, the red light would be on to warn you that the shutter's open. And another added feature is this interlock on the door. Being we have to place the samples in by hand, if you should forget that the shutter's on and open the door, the shutter automatically closes. This is a 20 to 40 kilovolt collimated beam, which is very intense, and it could do very serious damage to the human body, especially the hands if they should be inside the gauge. Another feature is the signs that are posted to stand behind the yellow line when the gauge is activated to keep you at a safe distance away from any scattered radiation.
All of these units located throughout the Alcoa Technical Center pose little danger to the operator when operated safely. During alignment or maintenance, the likelihood of exposure to X-rays is much greater than normal. These tasks should be performed only by qualified personnel. In many cases, the potential for radiation injury is also higher when modifications are made. Sometimes, in an effort to discover a better way of performing a task, safety considerations might be bypassed or overlooked.
Hi, Marty.
Ben, you again.
What do you mean, you again?
Another survey?
I'm getting something here. Have you modified this equipment recently?
Last week, we expanded the beam to get more signal, changed the collimation.
You're getting scatter.
Well, it can't be that bad. We can't be getting that much scatter.
Sorry, but you are. And Marty, you should have done a survey after you recollimated the beam.
The intentions are usually good, but in a research environment, modifications are sometimes made that could potentially affect safety for the operator or for bystanders.
Sometimes organizations feel that it is better for their conditions to modify the system. As soon as the equipment is modified, we no longer can assume the responsibility and or liability for the result of that modification. The only exception of that will be if that is done in conjunction with Siemens, and Siemens approve that the modification will not jeopardize the design of the safety.
It's important to request a project health and safety review and a formal survey after a modification has been done to X-ray producing equipment. This will ensure that there's no X-ray leakage out into the area where people are working and could be exposed. We have JSAs, which are formal safety written procedures that's used here at the Tech Center. It details how the X-ray producing equipment should be used and what the safeguards are that are in place.
We must do everything we can to minimize the risks associated with X-ray producing equipment. The equipment manufacturers do their part by supplying equipment that provides interlocks and other important safety protection features. Alcoa does its part by supplying equipment operators with film badges, film rings, pocket dosimeters, and training like this program. JSAs are posted on each piece of equipment, and annual surveys are conducted on each unit. Procedures and policies like the Project Safety and Health Review have also been developed to protect the operator. The final, most important part of this safety picture is you, the equipment operator. Ultimately, it's up to you to protect yourselves and your coworkers from radiation exposure.
I would say that people that work around this equipment feel safe, but they also respect the technology and respect that they are working with something that intrinsically could have a danger in it.
At Alcoa, safety is our most important concern. The number one priority is the safety of the people who work in the area, and they can't become too complacent and rely on interlocks or lights for their safety.
It is necessary that you always follow the safety precautions when associated with radiation. You'd be a fool not to.
Electricity is the same way. You can't see it, but you better respect it.
You should never feel completely safe with any instrument, especially when it has a danger feature attached to it.
Just understand that that is a very, very interesting and potentially beneficial tool for your analytical needs. However, we are still dealing with X-rays, and we should never forget that.
Radiation has been a wonderful advance in the course of human events. We couldn't have the medical profession that we have today without diagnostic and therapeutic radiation. We can't build airplanes safely. We can't build power plants safely without the technology to look into pipes and look through things that are made safer now because of that. We can't live without it, but it is inherently deadly and dangerous, and the people that work with it have to know what they're doing.